In the year 1324, a scholar in Timbuktu received a warning. An army was coming. Not just any army. This was the Moroccan Sultan's most feared military force, armed with gunpowder weapons that West Africa had never seen before. The scholar looked at his library. Thousands of manuscripts, centuries of knowledge, mathematics, medicine, astronomy, philosophy. He made a decision. That would take the world 600 years to fully understand. He buried them. To understand what was at stake, you have to understand what Timbuktu actually was. Not the punchline you have heard. Not the mythical faraway place people mention when they mean nowhere. Timbuktu was a city of knowledge. At its peak in the 15th and 16th centuries, it was one of the most important intellectual centers on the entire planet. It sat at the crossroads of the trans-Saharan trade routes, where gold and salt made it wealthy beyond measure. But it was not the gold that made Timbuktu legendary. It was the books. Over 700,000 manuscripts, handwritten, bound in leather, covering every field of human knowledge known at the time. While Europe was still debating whether the Earth moved around the sun, scholars in Timbuktu had already written detailed astronomical charts, mathematical theories, and medical texts that would not appear in Europe for another 200 years. This was not a primitive place. This was the intellectual capital of the world. At the heart of Timbuktu stood the Sankar University, founded in the 14th century. It predated many of Europe's most celebrated institutions of learning. Oxford University was founded around 1096. The University of Bologna, 1088. Sankar was operating at full capacity, teaching thousands of students by the early 1300s. At its peak, 25,000 students studied within its walls. In a city of 100,000 people, that meant 1 in every 4 residents was a student. Think about that for a moment. 1 in 4. Subjects included Islamic law, rhetoric, grammar, history, geography, mathematics, and advanced astronomy. Scholars came from Egypt, Morocco, Persia, and beyond, specifically to study here. Timbuktu did not need the world's validation. The world came to Timbuktu, and at the center of all of it were the manuscripts. Families did not just own books. They built private libraries, generation after generation, adding to collections that were passed down like the most precious inheritance imaginable. Because in Timbuktu, knowledge was wealth. In 1591, the Moroccan Sultan Ahmad al-Mansur sent an army across the Sahara Desert, 4,000 soldiers, armed with muskets and cannons. The Mali Empire, weakened by internal conflict, had never faced gunpowder warfare before. The defenders of Timbuktu, armed with swords and bows, had no answer for it. The city fell. What followed was systematic. The scholars, the very people who had made Timbuktu what it was, were arrested. Some were executed. Others were dragged in chains across the Sahara to Morocco, where they would spend the rest of their lives in captivity. Ahmed Baba, the greatest scholar Timbuktu had ever produced, a man who had written over 40 books, was among those taken. He reportedly told his captors, "The least learned man in Timbuktu has more books than ANY of you." The invaders did not understand what they had conquered. They wanted the gold. They had no idea what the books were worth. And so the books began to disappear. But here is what the history books leave out. The people of Timbuktu fought back, not with weapons, with silence. Families took their manuscripts and hid them in the walls of their homes, under floorboards, in sealed clay pots buried deep in the desert sand. Some were carried hundreds of miles away, hidden in remote villages, entrusted to families who swore to protect them, and told NOONE. This was not a single act of resistance. This was a coordinated, generational act of cultural survival. For 400 years, families kept the secret, passing the locations of hidden manuscripts from parent to child, to grandchild, to great-grandchild, never writing it down, never telling outsiders. 400 years. Then in the 20th century, researchers began to hear whispers, rumors of manuscripts in the desert, ancient texts hidden in villages no one had mapped. When they finally began to find them, they could not believe what they were looking at. Mathematics that anticipated European discoveries by centuries, medical treatments that modern doctors called sophisticated, astronomical charts of extraordinary accuracy. These were not primitive writings. These were the surviving records of one of the greatest intellectual civilizations the world has ever produced. Today, the work continues. In 2013, when another conflict threatened Timbuktu, the people did what their ancestors had done 4 centuries before. They moved the manuscripts again. Librarians and families smuggled hundreds of thousands of documents out of the city, hidden in vehicles, in rice sacks, under clothing, moving them to safety in Bamako, the capital of Mali. It took months. It was done in secret, and it saved an estimated 370,000 manuscripts from destruction. But researchers believe that is still only part of what exists. Estimates suggest that somewhere between 300,000 and one million manuscripts remain undiscovered, hidden in desert villages, buried in sand, locked in family homes, whose owners still do not trust the outside world enough to reveal what they have. The story of Timbuktu is not over. It is still being written. And here is what that means. Everything we think we know about the history of human knowledge, about who invented what, about which civilization contributed what to science, medicine, mathematics, and philosophy, is incomplete, because part of the record was hidden, and part of it is still out there. This is Echo of Ages. Every week, we find what was buried, what was hidden, what was taken, and what survived anyway. If this story moved you, share it. Because every time someone shares a video like this, a piece of history that was deliberately erased gets seen by someone who needed to know it existed. And next time on Echo of Ages, there was a queen. When the British Empire came to take the golden stool, the symbol of the soul of the Ashanti people, every king and chief in the room bowed their head. She stood UP. Her name was Yaa Santawa, and what she did next started a WAR. That story, next week.